I'm really excited because I've been in therapy now for, what year are we in?
24.
Almost 2025.
Yeah.
I quit my job in 2018. Okay, so like almost 7 years.
Okay.
Every single week with the same therapist. She's my saving grace.
Okay.
I actually was having this thought in the shower last night where I question myself before I do something because I'm like, will I be embarrassed to tell Erin about this? Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
There's
sure.
something I did recently that I still haven't told her I did because I'm embarrassed by my own actions and I
Sure.
regret doing it. But now that's the lens of like how I look at my life. Like,
Okay.
will I be confident in telling her this happened?
Yeah.
Or am I going to say it and like my palms are going to get sweaty and I'm going to be like, don't judge me. Because like I get it. So I want to start off by just learning more about how you got into the therapy practice journey.
Sure.
Because I do find, I don't know if it's uncommon, you can tell me, as like a 28-year-old male to be in this space. I love it.
Yeah, sure. No, it's, yes.
Right? It is uncommon.
Yeah, I would say, I think that's certainly valid. I mean, I would say certainly in terms of when I went to grad school, I was like, one of, I don't even know how many men in my sort of year. And it was always amusing of being like, sometimes people would come up to me and ask me and was like, well, what's your experience like here? Which I always found very funny too. Cause I was like, I don't know. Yeah. But, in terms of how I got into it, originally I was in college. I went to school here in the city. I was pursuing doing arts journalism. I always grew up just like loving movies, and I still do. Like it's something I like still think and talk a lot about with my friends, especially now that I live in LA and a lot of people are very into that.
Right.
But as I was just like sort of getting more into it, things weren't totally clicking personally. I was going through some like life stressors too, and I started going to therapy later than I wish I had. I would say.
I think that's for everyone.
Yeah. That's probably, that may be true.
I just feel like it takes like a certain real low to be like, okay, we got to do this.
Yes,
Where in reality, we should all be in therapy no matter what.
Yeah, or just giving it a shot at least, seeing what it's like. And I really enjoyed it. I admired my therapist. I think similarly, it influenced a lot of how I thought about myself and the world. Thinking about what would Dr. Weiss think? Sure, yeah, that thought probably came up for me. And it was something that I just like kind of brought up. I was actually very nervous to bring it up with him, which is funny looking back on it. I was like, oh, I'm worried he's going to judge me. Like I'm like trying to pick his brain, and he didn't give a shit. And we just like, we talked about it, and it was something where it started to just kind of make a bit more sense. Like a nagging thing I had personally pursuing journalism was like, I felt like I was like, especially arts journalism, which I love still. I just felt like I was like, what am I doing? Especially someone who's like, I've got, quite a bit of privilege in my life. I wanted to do something that felt more sort of directly helping others, I guess. I also am a yapper, as my wife likes to say. So I decided I kind of just was like, I guess I'll give it a shot kind of thing. I had done some like sort of mental health related work after college, in terms of like mostly like tied to like research labs out of my college, just because it was like sort of the most accessible thing that I could do, and some like volunteer stuff. And I just like generally liked it, and I spoke to people who were in grad school, and I just kind of tried to get a lot of information on like, okay, what are the routes, what are your options, all that stuff. I would say probably honestly the biggest thing, like, because going into it I was like, I don't know, am I doing the right thing? I don't know. I went to social work school at Columbia.
I looked into this program actually
for
myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, no kidding. I can share more about it if you want me to.
This was like 4 years ago before I had kids. Like maybe it's like a later in life journey for me. I don't know.
I mean, you could go at any time.
But it's something that's always interested me.
Yeah. There is definitely a lot of pros and cons. I would say the biggest thing is I really liked all the people that I met. It was a really great community. And I would say that was like almost the most affirming thing. I remember going to classes and just meeting a lot of people who I felt like, I was like, oh, I feel like kindred spirits. Yeah. Almost. That was like almost the sign where I was like, okay, I think I'm making the right choice. And honestly, like the thing that I feel very, very lucky that really I feel like cemented me becoming a therapist, and I feel like really enjoying it, is at Columbia there is a program to learn DBT, which is a therapy I specialize in, and I'll share a bit about. And that, it just like, I don't even know how to put it, like it just felt like such a natural fit for me personally, in terms of how I like navigate things and like to think about things and like to try to address things with people, all this sort of stuff. I feel like kind of dumbfounded at how fortunate it was, because Columbia is the only social work school that offers that program. I didn't know what it was when I went there.
Right.
I just like heard, oh, they have this program. Oh, people keep talking about it. People like it. Oh, I didn't even know really what the therapy was about.
I love when the universe works like that.
I feel it's funny. I have a friend who, she was also in my year. She and I work together. She has a bit more of like, I would say, a more common sort of trajectory of how you get to be into DBT, which is like you have some personal experience with it herself. And she was just like, shake her head at me, and she's like, this just fell into your lap. She was like, I've been working at this for years. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like I am, right. I am sorry. I'm sorry about that. Like, it's totally valid. It's fair.
But honestly, when it works like that, I'm big on like the woo-woo universe aspect of things. Like, I truly believe that it's okay. We're on the right path. Like, this is what was meant to happen, and let's do it.
Sure.
Just really quickly, Remy, are you picking up that sound up there? No. Oh, great. Perfect. I'm just gonna off.
Yeah. Of course. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Tell me if I need to move. Also,
no, that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, so you mentioned DBT.
Yes.
Dialectical Behavioral Therapy?
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
What is it?
That's a great question. It was, there's a bit to explain, but I'm going to try to do my best to like sort of condense the pitch of it.
Thank you.
Of course. It was originally created for people who have borderline personality disorder, BPD. It was made by a woman named Marsha Linehan, who she herself has now sort of like reflected on, thinking that she probably has BPD, and which is amazing, because she essentially created a therapy that is like the only thing that's found to be really helpful for it. And what, like, sort of to be a little bit more specific about what that kind of looks like with those kind of sort of someone with BPD, or traits of it, we could say, is someone who like really struggles with their emotions, feels a lot of intense emotions, a lot of up and down in their life. A lot of times BPD is misdiagnosed as bipolar disorder.
I was just going to ask if they're the same. Are they not?
They are not, no. So bipolar disorder is more about certain, like a mood state that you'll all of a sudden shift into. Okay. So for example, like, someone who has bipolar, if they travel and start partying a bunch, it could like lift them into mania. And then for like weeks, they will be in this extremely elevated state. They might have pressured speech, which is where basically you can't almost understand what they're saying. They're speaking so quickly. Okay. They don't want to sleep, all this sort of stuff. People with BPD can appear almost manic potentially, but it has more to do with like the emotions that they're experiencing related to what's going on in their life. They've just met somebody new and they're so excited and they want to do this and they want to do that. And kind of then the consequences, unfortunately, of having such, sort of turbulent emotions, which is a lot of times, I don't know, do you want me to offer like a content warning? Would that be okay?
Yeah, we should probably do that. Yes.
Okay. So there's like just a heads up. I'll be talking about things like suicide and self-harm and substance use and substance abuse. So what that can lead to a lot of times are folks who are chronically suicidal, are engaging in self-harming behaviors, who might have physical aggression. It's just like oftentimes living a very turbulent life, having a lot of time, like difficulty controlling themselves and their relationships. There's this sort of very pejorative view a lot of times of BPD of people who are manipulative. What's the movie with Michael Douglas and Glenn Close? Was that Fatal Attraction or something?
Okay. I'm not good with any movie or any actor.
I'm pretty sure. I think it's called Fatal Attraction.
I know that is a movie.
Yes.
I've never seen it though.
Okay. If I'm remembering, like that is like a very classic cinematic depiction of someone who has BPD, if I'm naming the right movie, of Glenn Close, where it's someone who's like super manipulative and like goes crazy when he like wants to leave, when like he wants to leave her, all this sort of stuff. But what it's like, what DBT is like really all about with helping people who are like this is sort of better understanding why they're engaging in the behaviors that they're engaging in, because they do them for a reason, including things like self-harming or threatening suicide or saying like really hurtful things to people that they love or hurtful things to themselves, and like better understanding then, okay, what are new ways of accomplishing that same goal? A lot of times people self-harm as a way to regulate themselves, actually, or as a way to communicate the distress to people around them, both of which I think are like pretty understandable things. Like when I'm upset, I also want to calm down. Right. When I'm upset, I also want people to know that I'm upset. It's just a lot of times these are people who don't understand other ways of accomplishing that, unfortunately, oftentimes due to their upbringing and the experiences that they've had through life. There's a lot of times people have pretty extensive trauma histories,
Yep.
whether it is things like physical and or sexual abuse, as well as, but like growing up in an environment that really doesn't seem to understand them, so it doesn't seem to get their experiences, is often very judgmental of them when they are upset. Why are you upset? Cut it out, stop it, all that kind of stuff.
I'm just curious because I know, well, I'll let that be their journey.
Okay.
With bipolar and BPD, are both or is one a like chemical imbalance? Do you know do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. What I would say is, because I'm not a doctor and I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't really want to weigh in too much because I basically don't want to say something wrong.
Fair. So fair. And we don't even have to go there. I'm just curious because is it something you're born with?
It's a valid question. I believe bipolar is something that is seems to be more biological.
Right.
Because oftentimes, like, for example, if I'm working with someone who is in a manic state, I'm just trying to get them medically stable, basically.
Right.
So then it actually becomes more about their medical providers themselves. Like, I'm obviously trying to do things to make sure they're not doing anything too dangerous as best within my power. Right. And to that point, it does seem to be something that I would assume is more chemical and whatnot. BPD, there certainly is, like, they've done studies where they've shown people's like brains before and after doing DBT in terms of like how they process and experience their emotions. There can be that shift. And what we say in DBT is like people with BPD are born like definitely biologically more emotionally sensitive overall.
But maybe the trauma.
Exactly.
That's why I asked, because I know instances of bipolar who also experienced deep trauma. And so I didn't know if that was also the case. With DBT, what are some of these practices that are helping these people?
Yes.
And are these practices things that we can all benefit from? Because like for me, I do not have.
Yes.
But why can't I do all of these acronyms? There's
BPD,
so many.
I know.
BPD.
Too many.
However, I definitely have a hard time regulating my emotions.
Yeah.
And I lose my shit more than I would like to.
Yes.
And I'm very hard on myself and I lash out. Like I think that there's obviously a spectrum.
Yes.
There's the diagnosis, and then there's just the rest of us who also struggle with certain things.
Yes.
So do we all benefit from these practices?
I would say most certainly yes.
Okay.
Because
so then please help us.
I'm here to help, and I'll try to offer specific things too. What I'll say, just as a little more background, as I've done this work more, and just like heard from smart people, all the things that I know I owe to very generous, smart people who have told me things. So if I sound like I know stuff, it's just because I've learned from good people. It seems a lot of like the folks who are like really more dysregulated, we would say. All they're basically trying to do is just very fervently avoid certain emotional experiences that are painful.
Okay.
And I would say that's like a pretty universal thing.
Right.
It's just a matter of, as you pointed out, like kind of the spectrum that you fall on, how acute that is. But I would say like people who struggle with like shutting down, people pleasing, like fearful of, certain stressful situations, whatnot. Like a lot of the things that we can struggle with, I feel like really relate back to how we're understanding and coping with our own emotional experiences. If we even like are aware of the emotions we're feeling, because unfortunately a lot of people a lot of times like don't even know what they're feeling.
Right.
And so to that point, I would say, yeah, definitely a lot of DBT I think can be really beneficial for people. It's not to say I think everybody needs what's called comprehensive DBT, which is like that's the thing for folks who, like I was describing, have BPD or are suicidal or self-harming, but can definitely benefit from what are the skills. So in DBT, we do a couple of different things, yet one of the biggest things is we're teaching people skills, which are essentially new behaviors, to try and basically like better live the life that they want to. Ultimately, it's their lives that they want to live, what their goals are. Yet, okay, you want to like have an improved relationship with people. Let's figure out a way to help you better calm down when you're feeling upset, or how to tolerate distress when something may be going on in your relationship, and how to better communicate yourself in that kind of relationship. And so we draw from there 4 modules of skills that we teach people. Modules are just like kind of like the groups. The first is mindfulness, which is essentially just, mindfulness is very big. Just like basically how to like be aware of yourself, of the present moment, like what am I thinking, what am I feeling, what's going on with the other person, all that kind of stuff. Then there are skills for distress tolerance, which are when you are feeling very distressed and upset, in like a crisis. How do we best tolerate that and hopefully actually bring our distress down? Skills for emotion regulation, so better understanding your emotions, as well as helping you to then try to hopefully, maybe change them based on sort of the situation. It's not like we have full control over our emotions, but we do have control over how we respond to them, which can help to shift our emotions. And then interpersonal effectiveness skills, so skills for when you're in a relationship, how to best kind of get your needs met without doing anything that's going to also harm the relationship.
And are there like tangible things?
Yes.
Okay.
You want me to offer?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay. So I'll try to, one of like sort of like the
like
hallmark.
the top one for each, I guess.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I can do the top one. That's okay. So for mindfulness, oftentimes when you hear about DBT, you hear of a thing called wise mind. Wise mind is a lot of DBT, I'll say, draws from like Zen Buddhism.
Okay.
And so this is like mindfulness is very much so drawing from that, where it's a lot about like how to be present and non-judgmental and not attached. But in wise mind, what's sort of how we view it is it's kind of like everyone, we all have, our emotions as well as reason, and we can be in a state where we are governed more by our emotions, which is called emotional mind, or in a state in which we are more governed by facts and logic and reason mind. So I think emotion mind is like, someone just said something really hurtful to you and you're like, fuck this person. How could they say this to me? What the fuck? Like, I want to yell at them. Reason mind is more of like you have like 1.5 million things to do in a day. I can't think. I just have to go. Bathroom, think about that later. Food, think about that later. Go. I just have to do this. I have to accomplish this. I have to accomplish that. And we represent this as a Venn diagram where emotion mind is one circle, reason mind is the other, and then where they overlap is wise mind, in which it's the balance between your emotions and your reason. Both are important, right? A lot of times people say, stop being so emotional, be reasonable. That's quite an invalidating statement because we all have emotions. Emotions are quite important. And it's kind of where we try to essentially tap into what is our own, like essentially think of it as like your internal compass, where your own personal values and goals lie, where you just like know this is the kind of person I want to be. This is the kind of life I want to live. And I'm going to focus on what's sort of within my control to help myself achieve that. That's like sort of, I'm trying to put it in the simplest, most like tangible terms possible. As you practice a lot of these skills more and kind of this concept, I think, becomes more solidified, it can even become a practice where you can pause and ask yourself, hold on, do I feel like I'm in my wise mind right now? Or even asking a question of like, what does my wise mind kind of say? It's almost like being able to like form like this dialogue with yourself, essentially, and pausing and like being able to just kind of reflect on, is this something I really want? Because a lot of times, like, especially true for folks with BPD, yet again, true for everybody is, let's say you grow up in a very high pressured environment, you have to do this, you have to go to this school, you have to get this kind of job. Unfortunately, that experience can cause us to almost like sever our ties in some ways with that kind of internal compass, with our wise mind, where we then feel like I'm doing these things for other people, but I don't actually feel happy. What is it that I really want? Yeah. So it's all about sort of getting in touch with that.
And the do. I mean, I especially resonate with that second half of like, I have a really hard time ever shutting off. Like if it were up to me, I would work 24 hours of a day.
Oh man.
And it's something that I'm consciously working on now, especially with my husband's help of like, does this actually help these 3 hours or like this last hour of the night that you're like sitting at your laptop trying to do these things? Is this really making a difference in any positive way? Or is it having a more intensely negative impact? Quite honestly, it's negative for the most part. So like navigating that, but this is interesting for me because I'm a visual person.
Sure.
So it's very helpful to think about it. And I have dialogues with myself all the time. And I try to do that like kind of pull out lens thing. But that's very helpful.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then what about for the other ones?
Yes. So for distress tolerance, the skills for when the shit's hitting the fan, you feel really upset. There's a group of skills that are called the TIP skills that are all about sort of shifting your body chemistry. And I'm just going to offer one just for the sake of time. That's like sort of, again, like the hallmark skill. It's the TIP is an acronym. The T stands for temperature. We also call this thing ice dives.
I was going to ask about this.
Okay. Have you looked this up? Are you familiar with it at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, why don't you explain it and then I'll share my familiarity with it.
Okay. Got it. So the most traditional way that we teach this for people to do is you get a bowl of ice water, you take a deep breath, and you put your face in the ice water for 15 to 30 seconds, or if 15 is too long, kind of as long as you can do, essentially. And then you come back up and you do that typically about 3 or 4 times. You can also do this with an ice pack, where you place this ice pack along sort of this portion of your face, the mask kind of portion, not covering your nostrils or mouth. You hold that against your face. This one you do standing. You lean forward, holding your breath, holding the ice pack, again, 15 to 30 seconds. And what it's doing essentially is tricking your brain into thinking you've just jumped into ice, like cold water. And what is it's activating is this thing called the mammalian dive response.
Okay.
So as mammals, we have this sort of natural response where if you were to fall into cold water, your body will shift you into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your kind of, we call like rest and digest, where your heart rate.
I'm always seeking.
Yes, sure. It's great. It's great. It's nice to be there. It's where your heart rate like lowers, your breathing rate lowers, your blood pressure lowers, all this kind of stuff where you feel more kind of at ease. Because if you fall into cold water, if you're splashing around, hyperventilating, you have a much less high chance of surviving that experience. And so our bodies, like, we've naturally sort of evolved to learn to do this. And so we're basically just like tricking our brain into thinking that. So a lot of times what I'll have people do is they're like upset, they're flying off the wall, what have you, and you do some ice dives and you come out of it and you're like, whoa. Wow. It's like everything sort of feels like it slows down. Things really come, like your distress level really decreases. It becomes so much easier to think, because so often what initially I'm teaching folks how to do is to regulate themselves when they're very upset, because we cross a certain threshold of distress where we're not able to think clearly anymore. We just sort of focus on the here and the now, the immediacy, and that's where we get impulsive and all that sort of stuff.
Is this the same? So I've tried this.
Oh, you have? Cool.
Yeah,
How's
but like
it go?
I almost drowned myself. I felt like I was just like
oh no.
I don't know. I didn't almost drown myself. That's such an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But I was like, I didn't love it.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious to try it again. It was one of these mornings where I just woke up so anxious. Like, there was nothing I could do to get out of this spiral. I'm a big spiral anxious person.
Yes.
And I just remember, I mean, it was years ago because we were still living in New York. I vividly remember like doing it right in our kitchen. And I just came up being like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
But maybe that's kind of the point. Is this similar to what we see of everyone doing cold plunges? Or no, because your face isn't going in?
That's a good question. So one is, I mean, I will say, it's not a soothing practice. So there are
at all. Yeah.
Yes. So there are soothing skills that we do teach people. But if anyone like is trying this, it's like, do not look for like, oh, it's going to feel really nice. It's actually, it's often quite intense. And if it's so cold that it's painful, you actually don't have to make it that cold.
Okay.
So just so you know.
Maybe that was my issue.
It's okay. Listen, I've done it too before. I'm like, oh, my face hurts now. But the intended effect, and I would recommend again doing it like 3 or 4 times, is you come up and you just like sort of notice this like kind of a wash of like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more clear-headed and calm. For the cold plunges, I'm not too sure. I'd be curious more so like what, if anyone studied it to see. I would say the face part is like, that is really important because from my understanding, we have like sort of these sensors in our face. That's why we're sort of putting like the ice pack on that portion that is indicating temperature to our brain.
Got it.
If I'm understanding correctly.
Because I've also heard of putting an ice pack on your vagus.
Interesting.
Vagus nerve? Something
sure.
in between your like boobs on your chest.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Well, yeah, I've seen it. Again, don't quote me. I've seen it on social media. So like Dr. TikTok, putting it on your vagus nerve to like bring you back into parasympathetic. Oh, cool. But I have no concept of whether those are the same.
Yeah.
I will speak to cold plunging. Like for me, well, I did it a lot in college because I played lacrosse. So like it was more of like we just were ice baths.
Yes.
Like that was part of our training post practice and post game rehab.
Yeah.
And then I've done it multiple times and I love it. I mean, it's my dream to have one in our house. Like we're trying to figure out how to make that possible. Yeah. But my husband mimics it in the shower every day.
Yeah.
And that, I think, for me, and I think why so many people love it and do it based on what I've seen on social media, is almost more of like the mental toughness of it all. Where like, yes, it brings you out of, because you can't spiral and think about all of these things that like you've created, these scenarios in your mind when you're so fucking cold that you're just trying to breathe.
Yeah,
I think that's what it is.
It's very distracting.
Right. So I think it brings you out of that.
Yes.
And then it's also like encouraging you to work on your breath work to get through difficult things.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think there's this sense of like, specifically, I know my husband would say this in the morning when he does it, and the few times I have in our shower, of like, I just did something really difficult and now I can take on my day.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's his mentality.
No, I love that. I think it all has to do with like what is sort of the what's the function of whatever it is that you're doing. If you're doing ice dives, like to try and activate this sort of dive response, that's great. I mean, I actually, an alternative I tell people is to actually take a cold shower, even too, because it can simulate that similar experience. It is a very distracting thing. It also makes you feel like, wow, I'm doing something really difficult. I can get through this, whatever it might be, right? So I think it can have a number of different intended purposes. All I'll say, I know for sure with like the science part is like I'm saying, sort of the dive response part. I in terms of putting the ice back on your chest, I'd be curious to try it. I could see it being helpful for a number of different reasons. Yeah, sure.
What about the ice throwing or holding of ice cubes? Is that DBT also?
It can be, yes. It's not necessarily a specific, like that is a specific thing, a skill. I will say I often, if someone is like really struggling with self-harm, one of the things I may have them do initially is squeezing ice cubes, because it's very intense as a sensation. It's very distracting. It also is painful in a way that can be similar to cutting or something like that. And it does not leave any marks, right? So I would much rather someone experience pain from squeezing ice cubes than, harming themselves.
That's a practice that women do to prepare for natural labor.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of people, I mean, I can't say whether they're the same. I don't think they are, but I had an epidural, so I can't speak to natural childbirth.
Sure.
But I have friends who have thought that they wanted to do natural childbirth, and this was part of like the prep. And they will stand, I don't know what the timing is, but holding ice cubes for a certain amount of time to really work on, like, I'm in immense pain.
Right.
How do I focus my mind and my breath work so that when the time comes to push that baby out, I can tap back into that mentality.
Yeah.
I have no interest in that personally.
Yeah, neither.
I love drugs in that sense. I'm like, they exist for a reason.
Yes.
But I do know that that is something that people do.
More power to them.
What about ice throwing?
Ice throwing?
Or like I've seen people throw ice cubes in a bathtub.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Have you? Okay. No.
That's not necessarily something. No, I encourage people with. Again, I mean, I will say, like, let's say if someone were to tell me, like, yeah, if I throw ice in a bathtub and it really,
I think that was more for like getting them out of angry emotion.
Yeah, sure. If that again, like if someone was like, yeah, that helps me to dispel some anger and burn off some energy, and then I feel calmer after, I'd be like, okay,
do it.
Like, yeah, go ahead for sure.
It's like those what are they called? Those rooms where you can break everything.
Rage rooms. Yes.
Rage rooms.
Sure.
I wanted to go to one so badly in a very specific period of my life. I didn't, but I still dream of that moment.
They're pretty fun. I've been to one.
Right? I feel like it would be a really nice release when I'm in that mood.
Yeah.
And then what about, the other two modules?
No, that's okay. So for emotion regulation, these are skills for when we're not as high distress. So a lot of skills we tell people is like based on what your SUDS rating is. SUDS stands for Subjective Units of Distress Scale. Okay. So just basically 0 to 10, how distressed you feel. 0 is like neutral or none. 10 is like the worst you can feel. And just a note, like a lot of times people think 10 is like panic attack, like crying, whatever. And it can be. It can also be like you feel so shut down, you can't get out of bed, or you're so depressed or what have you. So it varies. This is for when you're a little lower on your SUD scale, like 6 or below. And the skill I'll offer for this, since you mentioned things like ruminating, is, and it's like one of my favorite skills to teach people, is it's called mindfulness of current emotions, in which you are essentially just being aware of the emotional experience you're having currently in this moment in time. And that's kind of it, essentially. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. If you're a visual person, you can close your eyes and imagine that you're standing at a beach and that the emotion you're experiencing is like a wave in the water. And you can watch the wave rise and fall, because that's what our emotions do. They just go up and they go down. They go up and they go down. If that's hard, or if you want another way of doing it, you can also just locate the physical distress that you are feeling related to the emotion. Like, oh, there's like a lump in my throat or tension in my chest. And I encourage people to be just very like curious and like almost just like watch it as if you were watching something on TV. Like, okay, what's going to happen? Like, as I just pay attention to this emotion. Because oftentimes what happens is your emotion starts to just run its natural course and dispel, and your distress decreases, and you feel a lot better, a lot quicker, actually. And it's really helpful for rumination, because a lot of times the reasons that we're ruminating, we're sort of circling about specific things, is for two big reasons. One is we're trying to sort of give ourselves a greater level of control than we have. If I think about this over and over and over again, then maybe I'll have plans for this and that and this and that. And the fact of the matter is, oftentimes like we don't.
Right.
And that's scary. Like we don't really want to have to encounter the fact that we don't have control over something. The second piece is when we ruminate, we're not really focused on the distress that we feel in our body also. So it's a way of distracting ourselves from the physiological feelings that we're having. And yet if we instead just focus on those feelings, we can find that they pass. We're not ruminating quite as much anymore. And it's really nice. It's also something I really encourage people to do a lot of, because like I said, so often we're avoiding our emotions.
Right.
And this is instead the exact opposite. You're learning to sit with and tolerate your emotions, which makes them just easier to sit with. I mean, it can still be a lot. Emotions can be so painful, yet it just overall in time, it's like building up that muscle, if you will.
Okay. And then what about the last module?
For interpersonal effectiveness, so again, skills like help in relationships, sort of the big one, there's a skill called the Dear Man, which is an acronym. Basically,
so many acronyms.
There's a lot. When I was learning DBT, I had open on my computer like a tab of literally all of the skills listed out.
Right.
Because I just was like, how the fuck am I going to remember all of them?
Yeah, it's like a new language.
It is. There's a lot. It took me a while, and now fortunately it's in my brain. But it's basically a skill for when you need to request something from somebody, or you're trying to express a need. And it's basically like a script, essentially. The dear is like the things that you say. The man is how you want to say it. So just very quickly, it's first you describe the situation, like trying to just stick to the facts. So if someone's like late for dinner, instead of saying like, you were so rude and you don't care about me, you're instead saying you were 20 minutes late, right? It's just a fact. We then express the emotional impact that has on us and the thoughts that we're having. Like, it made me feel neglected. It made me think that you don't care about me. The N is we assert a request. Could you please text me the next time you're running late, just so that I know? And then the R is the reinforce, which is essentially like, why would the other person listen to our request? What's the incentive for them? Not to like manipulate them or what have you. It's just like anytime we know doing A gets us B, it just motivates us more. So it can be something as simple as like, I would really appreciate it. It'd make me feel better if you were to text me. People are often like, cool, I want to do that. The man part is we stay mindful. You stay on topic, basically, of the conversation. Because so often, I mean, have you ever brought something up with someone difficult and then they shift the conversation and then you go down, and then you don't.
And then I'm like, what are we even fighting about?
Exactly.
Like, how did we get here?
Exactly. Right. So you kind of just want to be a broken record, and there's a way to do it gently, not to just be like, I'm talking about that. Like, there's ways of handling this, but you essentially want to just be like, no, we're talking about this. The A is appearing confident. So it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to, like, a lot of times it can be very nerve-wracking to like express ourselves to people. It's just trying to speak clearly, make eye contact, sit up straight, because people are more likely to hear us when we do that. And then the N is negotiate. So maybe you have to give to get a little bit. It's up to you if you want to really negotiate with people in terms of what your request is. But it's something where it's like, okay, it's fine if you're 10 minutes late, but if you're running more than 10 minutes late, can you text me, as an example for the example that I'm giving? So those are examples of, I would say, one skill from each of the modules.
No, but I think especially that last one is so helpful, because we just had this conversation in an episode about the roommate phase of postpartum.
Okay.
And how to go about points of contention with your partner and keep them as discussions rather than arguments and fights.
Yes.
And one of the biggest things we talked about is keeping the I statements instead of you.
Yes.
Like, when this happened, I felt.
Yes.
Not, you did this.
Yes.
Because I know for me personally, when my husband and I are having like the hard conversations, I'm so much more receptive. And, do you ever listen to Armchair Expert?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so Dax has said this years ago, but he was like, this feels weird to say because it's not my relationship, but he's talked about it so many times that I know, and I used to listen to the show like religiously.
Yeah.
That his wife would be on her phone at night, and he'd be like, put your phone down, put your phone down, put your phone down, and nagging her. And this is something that happens in our household both ways.
Of course.
And it's annoying to the person on their phone, because it's like, but I'm doing something. Like, my husband's like, you always have an excuse. You're always like, but this.
Yes.
But if the person who's frustrated by the phone use instead would just say, hey, when you're on your phone like that, I don't feel like you're giving me any attention.
Yes.
And I feel second place.
Yes.
And this makes me feel unloved. Or whatever it's bringing up for you, the other person's going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. I don't want you to feel that way.
Yes.
Like, of course I'll put my phone down. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yes.
So I think that is just an example, like a tangible thing of kind of this dear man. And it is so interesting and obvious the different response you get from the person when you approach this way.
It's also, and 100%, absolutely. It's also because it's something where people can't read our minds. They don't know what we're feeling.
Totally.
And so when we just say, stop doing this, they don't necessarily understand why or the impact it may be having on us. People also don't love to be necessarily told what to do. Instead, making it more of a request can also be beneficial. It's also something that typically is more accurate to really what's going on. Because a lot of times we say, you made me feel this, you made me feel that, which isn't really true. We can't make people feel things at all. Like we can intend to do something, like I can tell a joke with the intention of trying to make you laugh. Don't guarantee you're going to laugh at my joke though, right? Or we can buy a gift for somebody with the intention of them loving it, making them feel joy. They may hate the gift, right? And so it's more accurate about saying basically, this thing that you're doing is making me feel X, right? It also sort of cuts out this piece of intention, in which a lot of times we get very caught up on intention. Oh, I didn't mean it. And it's okay if you didn't mean it, and it still is making somebody feel that way.
Intention and impact are very different things.
Absolutely, yes.
This is something that was interesting for me in my personal relationship, was noticing there would be something that would happen and it would like trigger me and I'd get so angry.
Yeah.
And in my husband's defense, he's like, what? Like, this isn't, but really unpacking it all and realizing, oh, when that happened, it triggered how I felt in my childhood of when my parent did this.
Right.
And so, yes, it's not your fault because you maybe did it once and I grew up seeing it 100 times, but that one time brought me back to the moment of where it was the 100th time in my house, you know?
Yes.
And I think that's been so helpful for us personally, of navigating that and then realizing, like, for him especially, oh, she's not freaking out at me.
Yes.
I didn't necessarily do anything wrong,
yes,
but this brings up a lot of feelings for her. I want to get into some other acronyms that I wrote down.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So actually, before that, I want to just one last question on DBT. What would a typical session look like? I'm used to talk therapy.
Yes.
So I'm just talking with my therapist. Like, what does a DBT session look like?
If someone's doing what's called comprehensive DBT, which I'm sort of making that distinction because that is like the very formal way. That's what Marsha Linehan created. That is what has been researched and studied. And that's not to say you can't do what's called DBT informed or DBT light therapy. There's sort of different acronyms in which you're taking pieces of the therapy, and it can be beneficial. It's just there's no like manual for it, let's say. But for comprehensive DBT, there's sort of two parts to the treatment that people see in their weeks. There's the individual sessions, and the way that works is you come in. You set an agenda. You're focusing really on sort of the last week of that person's experiences and focusing on specific behaviors that you've agreed both of you to focus on. Usually you get to like one or two. So like, let's say lashing out at people or self-harm. Obviously, if it's something that's like self-harm or suicide, that comes first. Yeah. Because, that's life-threatening.
Right.
And then what you do is you really break down like moment to moment what happened. So let's say for the lashing out thing, like, why did you scream this thing at somebody? What happened? Basically to trigger that. What was going on that day? And you get this really sort of good breakdown of moment to moment to moment. Well, then when they said this, I thought this, and then I felt this, and then I thought about this, and then this thing happened, right? So I was like triggered by something from my childhood or what have you. And it gives you all these sort of little moments to really break down, okay, why was this behavior happening? What was the purpose of it? And what are things that I can do differently now? And that's where we can sort of start to really integrate skills. So, okay, when someone says this to you, actually first pause, take a second, take a breath. If you need a moment, leave the room, do this skill, regulate yourself. And then you can express yourself this way to this person. And it helps to just really make a very sort of tangible step-by-step almost like plan to do to help navigate difficult issues. The second part is there's a skills group component. So it's more like it's group therapy, but it's more like a class where you're learning all of the skills. So all of the modules are covered. It takes 6 months to get through. And you're just going and you're just learning the skills. And so that's, if someone's in that therapy, that's what it looks like sort of in terms of your week. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. And then some of the other things I wrote down were like eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing,
EMDR.
Yes. Is that tied into DBT or are they completely separate?
They're separate. I mean, you can do them in conjunction, yet it's something that you want to, there's some sort of like prerequisites you might want to do first. So EMDR is a therapy for post-traumatic stress, so for PTSD. It was developed by a woman named Francine Shapiro. And it's strange, I'll say, because We don't exactly know why it works, yet it does. Like research consistently shows that it does. And basically what you have people do is revisit some unpleasant experience, a traumatic event. And as they do that in their mind, they're just sort of thinking about it. You have them typically, it's not always the case, follow what is called a bilateral stimulation, in which there's something visual that's moving back and forth. So I'll look at the camera here. So you can wave your fingers back and forth, and someone's eyes are just following them back and forth, like left and right, not necessarily with your head. You can also do it with like a ball on a screen. There's these light bars that they sell, but you can also do it through tapping. You can do it with sounds. So it's any sort of, again, back and forth sort of stimulation. What it seems to help people do is to basically better process these experiences where, this horrible experience I had, with my dad growing up. He said all these awful things about me. It's haunted me. No longer does it feel so present and so scary and so terrible. And no longer do I think of myself as a bad person because of that.
And they're doing these things while you're discussing this trauma or while you're thinking about it?
More so thinking, yes.
Okay.
So when you're focusing on the memories, there's like setup that you do, but the way it like really looks a lot of times in those sessions, if you notice I'm pretty talkative and I am often in DBT sessions. In EMDR, it's much more, a lot of times I'm very quiet because the point of it is really essentially like the thought is all this person has to do is be thinking about the experience and following whatever the bilateral stimulation is, and it will help them to reprocess this memory. And so sometimes even what that looks like is I'll just have them follow something, I'll pause, I'll say, okay, what did you notice? And they just sort of recount a little bit, and then I'll just go, okay, keep going with that. And the whole session could just look like that over and over and over again.
And they're noticing things about that trauma that they're revisiting?
A lot of times, yes.
And is this why people, I've seen and heard that people will tap like themselves when they're maybe dysregulated?
Yeah, it seems it's something that I think it seems to be helpful. It's found from the EMDR training I went to. They talked a lot about how bilateral stimulation has been found to be like have a calming effect on people. Again, I'm kind of like I don't know exactly, but yeah, I think for sure. I mean, like a lot of times you teach kids like sort of this butterfly hug sort of thing where they can tap themselves when they're feeling upset, and it does seem to be calming. I mean, the theory for EMDR is that the bilateral stimulation, the eye movements or the tapping of the sounds is allowing your brain to basically just process the information in the way that we would normally with other experiences. That because of that traumatic experience, you are not able to. So like you trip and fall, typically it's not fun. Maybe you're a little embarrassed. Maybe you're a little bruised. It's not something that haunts you, right? And that's because your brain's able to like look at it and go, oh, you know what? No, that sucked, but it's fine. Whatever, it's over. And so it's able to essentially allow that same sort of processing to happen for these events that were really awful. And so we no longer are like, oh my God, I'm so, this thing. It's more of like, yeah, that time my dad said all that stuff was awful. And I was, a kid. I didn't know any better. It really wasn't my fault. It's just a bummer kind of thing. Right?
The tapping interests me because I catch myself naturally tapping my forehead
when I spiral. Okay.
Because I'm like, come back.
Yeah, sure.
Like a sense of just like, I don't know. I can't explain it.
Sure.
But then also I do this, I've talked about this now so many times on the show, this subconscious manifesting course to be magnetic.
Okay.
And part of it is while we're doing these deep imaginings, which is a like kind of guided meditation, I would say. You're tapping right, left, as she's explaining to you what you're supposed to be envisioning. And I don't know, I just find the tapping aspect.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I literally don't know the science behind it, but like some of this shit works.
Sure.
And then what about exposure and response prevention?
Yes.
ERP,
or sometimes you see it EXRP. I don't know why the acronym
just
changes.
Keep people on their toes.
I guess so. It's literally it's the exact same. That is a therapy that was originally made for people with OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder. Which can I share a little bit about OCD?
I would love that.
Okay, cool. Because a lot of times people hear OCD and you think like washing your hands or organization. People will say that like, oh, it's my OCD with like I want things to be neat, and like that can be the case, but it's actually OCD is like, in terms of what it really is, it's like it can be very different. It's where you have some kind of obsessional fear and then you engage in a compulsive behavior related to it. That's all it means, basically. And so what that looks like is I'm afraid of getting sick and dying, so I compulsively wash my hands. That's sort of what we typically think of. But it can look very different. It can be like I obsessively worry about saying something wrong, so I compulsively reassure myself I was okay. So it can be internal, or it can be external. Did I upset you? Are you okay? Are things okay? Right? Are you mad at me? Right? And unfortunately, what happens with the compulsion is we're just trying to avoid the fear. And so the thing that's most helpful for it is to expose ourselves to the fear. I really like exposure a lot in terms of like what I do with people. I was sort of talking about like with emotions, we try to avoid them. I try to expose people to their emotions. I try to expose people to a lot of their fears. So even when I'm working with someone with OCD, I'm definitely doing this kind of therapy. Yet a lot of people, I actually really want to basically have them like lean into and encounter their fears, because it results in a lot of really nice things, honestly. I will say that the therapy itself of doing exposure is deeply unpleasant, and actually sort of turn into like the opposite of what you'd expect from a therapist. I'm not very warm or very like sort of nurturing. It's more of like, yeah, all your fears are going to come true. I'm almost like this like evil
fucking nightmare if my therapist ever said that to me.
It's strange. It like sort of brings out the little brother in me, where I'm sort of like jabbing at people a little bit. It is honestly like, it's this weird thing where you're doing something that seems like immediately very hurtful, yet it actually is like deeply compassionate, because you're helping people to see that even their worst fears are things that they probably can tolerate, probably aren't true. And then what happens when you learn that, and it takes repeated practice to really learn that, is you no longer are so governed by the stuff that scares you. Like, let's say you have social anxiety, you avoid going out, social interactions can feel so painful. Well, if you keep just like doing it over and over again, and there are lots of ways to sort of, simulate that for people, or exercises you can have them do, suddenly you don't get so scared about going out, and it's easier to be yourself and talk to people and make friends, and you don't worry and plan about, what am I going to say to this person, what about this, what about that. You don't ruminate quite as much. So
I'm fascinated by OCD because I have people close to me in my life who have diagnosed OCD, but it's not, again, what we've like been told of like, oh, I'm gonna close the door 10 times before I leave the house. And I experienced a form of postpartum OCD around feeding and sleep, and obsessive over those things for the fear of what would happen if they didn't go that specific way. But I think the exposure aspect of things is interesting, because I guess I said that would be my nightmare if my therapist ever said that. But now I'm thinking when I ruminate and spiral and I tell her, she's like, okay, but like, what if it did?
Right.
What would actually be like, what would be so bad about that?
Right.
And then I kind of go down that path. I'm like, okay, would that actually be that bad? I do think it's very helpful. We also see, again, on TikTok, but I see these videos of people being like practicing exposure therapy. I just saw one recently, this girl sitting at like a park that was like packed, and she just yells out, "Today is my birthday."
Yes.
Because she's like, she, I guess, hates telling people about herself or social anxiety or whatever. Or I feel like there was one mega viral video, I don't even know, last year or something, of someone just like laying on a yoga mat in the middle of a busy street, just like laying there and doing her own thing.
Yes.
I actually was thinking about this today on my way in. Again, not to bring up to be magnetic again, but I was doing a guided, like a deep imagining, guided meditation on the train.
Okay.
And at one point she has you like breathe in, and then you're supposed to like exhale, like, and like that vibration.
Okay.
But I'm on a packed fucking commuter train.
Yeah.
So I'm like sitting there with my eyes closed, and like, I don't care. Meditating is one thing. I could be taking a nap, but I was not about to be like,
right. And all these people look at you.
But then I'm like, what would actually matter? So then I'm having this internal battle with myself. I was like, just do it. Who the fuck cares? Do it.
Yes.
And then I'm like, no, you can't do that. This girl sitting in the seat next to you is going to stare at you like, what is happening? Do I open my eyes and tell her, hey, don't be alarmed, I'm meditating?
Right.
Or do I just say, fuck it? Who gives a shit? So
did you do it?
I didn't. I kind of did this one where I was like,
okay, you
a
little bit.
Like the train was making noises. I was like, she probably can't even hear me. And this is like so ridiculous to say and specific to my life as a content creator. But like another one was, I literally felt like it was exposure therapy, because I have aspects of embarrassment around my job in terms of like, I wouldn't die filming something in public. Like, I hate that.
Okay.
And we were at the US Open, me and 3 of my friends who are content creators. We were there with a brand to create content.
Yes.
Like, I was technically working.
To film in public, yes.
But they're literally leaving Arthur Ashe Stadium, and we're like at the other stadium, and our like creative girls like, okay, let's do this. And my 2 friends who I'm with one has been a model her entire life, and the other was like a professional dancer. So they're very comfortable in the like, well, I'm working and this is my job and who the fuck cares?
Right.
They literally didn't see any people. And I was like curled up in a ball, so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the truest form of exposure therapy for me because I have to do it. I got to get over it.
Yes.
And my friend's like, literally, you're never going to see these people again. What does it matter?
Right. Yeah.
And she's like, this is your job. And but it truly, that was like the real moment of exposure therapy for me recently where I was like, okay, I have no choice. Well, I always have a choice. Right. But you got to just move forward. And did anything bad come of it? I didn't. No. Were there people staring? Yes. Was I so embarrassed? But does it matter?
Right. Exactly. It's I love that. I love that for you. I'm so glad you did that.
I will show you some of the video. There was at one point this man that came up and was like, "What's going on here?" And our friend who's recording it, she was like, "She needs help. She's embarrassed." And he's chanting in the back, "Go, Cam, go!" Like it was a full scene.
I love it. The more, the better. It's I love all this because we so often like do things out of fear of what the reaction's going to be. What are people going to think of me? And how much control do we actually have over that? Like over what people think of us? Because the girl on the train next to you, she might have gone, "Oh, whatever that lady's doing is cool," right? As compared to judging you. Right?
Well, she could have been like, "Oh, I do that too.
Yeah.
Why don't I do it on the train?"
Yeah. And then you may have struck up a conversation.
Fucking crazy.
Right.
And who cares?
Exactly. Right. It's and when we learn to really sort of tolerate that, and there's sort of this thing that happens, I think a lot of people describe as like, it's almost like you can cognitively know something, but emotionally you can't. Sort of like, it's kind of like what you were experiencing where I know it does not matter what that person thinks.
Absolutely.
And yet emotionally I'm still like, ugh. And that's
my life.
Well, it's why I'll encourage you to lean into some more exposure, because it's through encountering your fear repeatedly, you start to see it allows those things to align, where you can know it and also you can feel it, where you're like, okay, I know this doesn't matter and I actually feel that, and so I don't care.
Right.
And then you can start to just live your life a lot more of how you want it to, if you feel like it is impeding in any way in terms of how you want to dress, where you want to go, the things you want to do in public. Because the fact of the matter, and it's sort of a similar kind of like more cognitive question I ask people, similar like, okay, what would your fears be? Is also like, okay, let's say, like if I'm working with somebody and they're worried about, oh, my boyfriend will get really upset with me if I maybe say that. I'm like, well, let's say your boyfriend did get upset with you for saying that. Would you like that? Is that the kind of person you want to be
dating?
Why
would you be with your boyfriend?
Exactly. And the answer is always like, yeah, you're right. Actually, I would hate if like me expressing this need, I would get yelled at for that.
Right.
Right. And that can be helpful to push people to then do those things. And still, I'm a big believer in you kind of just got to do it.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I will expose myself more. It's
Yes.
well, it's so interesting. Of like, I would go out onto a stage of 1,000 people and talk without any prep, no problem.
Wow.
Don't care at all.
Wow. But
I'm
it's
like,
in
put me out
public
there.
where it's people aren't seemingly.
But I think it's also, if we get like really granular, it really goes to the still hurdle I'm trying to get over of explaining this is my job.
Right. Okay.
Because I think the word influencer or content creator gets such a bad rep.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, what do they really do? They just took a picture of themselves and posted it online. Where like, I'm not saying at all it's the hardest job in the world. I will never claim that. It's quite easy.
And it's challenging.
But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's challenging.
And so I think it's that part.
Yeah.
And it feels, that aspect of things, the filming, like feels egotistical. So then I'm like, oh my God, are these people going to think I'm so full of myself?
Right.
It's all of that narrative.
And I imagine also sexism plays a big part of that too, in terms of because so often people are more likely to judge.
I mean, you see men who are content creators and they have media companies.
Right.
They're not influencers.
Sure. Yes,
but
exactly.
all the females are just influencers.
Right.
It's a very different reaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to like, the thing is, it very much so makes sense to like not like all of these things. Like I can't blame you. I wouldn't like that either. And also it's like, it's just about learning, like if somebody thinks that you like that, then fuck them kind of thing. Right?
Literally, why does it matter?
Yeah.
I know. I'm working on it
every
day.
You got this.
Thank you so much. We close the show with a segment of filling your cup. I'm a huge proponent of doing things that fill your cup, especially, I mean, not for you, but as a mom, like it's very important for me to do that first thing before I'm helping my children.
Yeah.
How do you personally fill your cup? And you can get as granular as you would like.
Okay. Couple things. Well, one is, as I mentioned, I still love movies. So I'm an ardent AMC A-lister. I like going to the movies a lot. My wife and I, we will watch a lot of movies. I would say spending quality...
What's one of your most favorite recent movies that's like newer?
That's newer. I loved Anora. I saw it recently.
I heard about that.
It's very good. It's sad. It's a lot. It's about like it's a lot about like class and stuff.
Okay.
It's good. A lot of it's very funny also too. I really love this movie. Also, probably my favorite movie this year is called Hitman. It's on Netflix. It stars Glenn Powell. It's about a guy who has to like...
He's in everything this past year.
I know, and I do love him. So I'm cool with it. He like has to play... He like is working with like the New Orleans Police Department where he like pretends to be a hitman for people who then hire him to then like entrap them basically. Then he meets a woman who he really likes who thinks that he's a hitman, and so then he has to start pretending to actually be a hitman for her.
I will watch that. I'll watch that.
It's a lot of fun.
I did hate the movie he was in with Sydney Sweeney.
Oh yeah, it was
bad.
Yeah,
it was so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah. It kind of it benefited from the fact that we don't make rom-coms anymore, really. But it's not.
We need good rom-coms. Did you watch Nobody Wants Us?
No, but I know a lot of people.
You should.
Okay.
TV, but still.
Sure.
You should.
No, it's yeah. No, I know people really loved it.
It binges like a movie.
I believe it. I want to get around to it because I love rom-coms. Okay, so going to movies.
Yep.
Like definitely like quality time with my wife in terms of just like even if we're just like making dinner at home. Well, she's the one who makes. She's a much better cook than I am. I clean. That's my duties. And just like spending like really good time where we just like share about our days.
Yeah.
Just like get to have that like time together, and like even just something as simple as like making like some kind of plan with friends, if whatever, even just getting dinner or something like that. Like I'm a very extroverted person. And so spending time with people like really, really makes me feel good, makes me feel very fulfilled and very happy. So if I'm like, going to the movies and getting dinner with friends or something like that, that's like, I'm like, yeah, this is great. I love it. That's wonderful. Life. Yes. So,
well, this was so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I just want to say, I really appreciate speaking with men, specifically like of my age or even younger, who are like in touch with their emotions. No, seriously. And willing to have these conversations. Have you read For the Love of Men by Liz Plank?
No.
I think you would enjoy it.
Okay, I will check it out.
It's about toxic masculinity.
Oh, sure.
And how we can encourage men to be more in touch with their emotions and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it's something as a mother of two boys that I'm constantly striving for.
I can imagine. I will say that my wife's been very helpful for that. My own therapy. I've had a lot of very kind people who have supported me and helped me because I've had to learn how to tolerate and expose myself to my own fears and my own emotions. So it's helped me to be hopefully a better person. Yeah.
I love watching men put in some personal growth work.
Sure.
It's like, truly, I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, the hottest thing you could do is when you're like, I can't do that right now. I have to meditate. I'm like, say less, take off your pants. Thank you so much for coming on here. For people, do you practice? Well, you practice in California.
And New York.
And New York? Okay,
yes.
so plug yourself.
Okay,
where can they reach out, support you, work with you?
Sure. So I am a part of a practice called Behavioral Psych Studio that we have an office in New York. Okay. Up in the Upper West Side, just sort of like right by the Beacon Theater. I work in the LA office that we also have. So but I practice in California, New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. I've got other lovely members of my team too who all do the kinds of therapies that I'm talking about, DBT, EMDR, ERP, as well as some other stuff too that's cool, who practice in a variety of states as well. You can look us up online, behavioralpsychstudio.com, and you can read some more, and you're welcome to reach out to me if anybody wants to.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You might just get some people out here. Sure, I will link everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.